So my number one is The Birdcage from '96, directed by Mike Nichols, starring Robin Williams, Nathan Lane, Gene Hackman, Diane Wiest. Two Diane Wiest movies on my list. I just realized that.
Interesting.
But a quick log line, a gay cabaret owner and his drag queen companion agreed to put a false straight front so that their son can introduce them to his fiance's right-wing moralistic parents. So this is sort of my kind of laugh out loud movie, I would say. And I think to me, this is like, I've been talking a lot about, humor being rooted in reality, the day to day, or even the bad times. It's still very much rooted in reality. So for sure, otherwise it would not be funny to me, but it's definitely camp. It's definitely heightened. But I think the reason why it's funny is because it is rooted in reality. I think there's a great amount of world building that happens here with so much of detail where you have the heightened gay reality of a drag club and the people who operate in this area where apparently everybody wears a thong, no matter what. I've never seen this much thong on
It's Florida. That's what they do. It's Florida. That's their
I would think
state attire. Yeah,
exactly. So there's that, and then there's the heightened kind of reality of the right-wing Republican, which is Gene Hackman and Diane Wiest and that clan, and then the comedy is definitely in the craziness and idiocy of these people individually, but the comedy is really in when you bring these people together. I mean, that dinner scene, which goes on for a very long time, I think is one of the funniest scenes or parts of a movie ever. I've seen this movie a million times and I still laugh at it like crazy, even though it's very campy and heightened. But there's a strong emotional core at it, and I think that's what you're seeing. You're seeing people who are different from each other. You're seeing people who are, looking for love, and there's something very real about that. They're fighting their own insecurities. In Nathan Lane's character, who's afraid of getting older and not being attractive anymore or not being relevant anymore. The Robin Williams character, even though he set up this whole drag club, which apparently does pretty well, he still has sort of one foot in quote unquote classic masculinity and sort of struggles with what is it to be gay when you're maybe not stereotypically gay. What does that mean? And the same goes for the Republican right-wing people. They're still insecure. I mean, the whole box of chocolates detail is just so funny to me. Like, all Gene Hackman wants to do is eat chocolates when life gets tough. So I don't know. I just find this movie hilarious. But of course, it's Mike Nichols. So, it's not a shabbily done comedy camp movie. It's shot by Chivo, which is amazing. You see that from the first shot as to how the camera pans, into Florida. And there's just so many great details from the dinner table scene, how the camera is moving all over. It just is shot beautifully. The whole cast is amazing, except for the son, but I'll give him a pass. Everybody else is incredible. Elaine May wrote this movie. There are like a million one-liners in this movie that are just so funny to me. So yeah, this is sort of my if I'm in a bummed out mood and if I want to get out of it, this is the movie I put on. And there's something about, I don't know, dressing up weird, which is funny to me. It always has been. For the longest time in my life, I was kind of scared of drag queens because they felt very, I don't know, tall and sort of, I don't know, scary to me. Yeah. And over time, I think my way into that has been, this is so ridiculous. And I think there's something about just the funniness that comes with dressing funny. There's a lot of great physical comedy humor, which is another one of my things that I really enjoy watching on screen. Not just in life. This is silly, but it's pretty funny when somebody trips over. I do find that funny.
A pratfall is classic. Yeah. Slip on a banana peel, fall down. Nothing funnier than seeing someone else fall down.
Exactly. So I think this movie has a lot of that imbued in it. So yeah, that's my number one, The Birdcage.
So I had seen this movie kind of in the 90s. Like it was on TV, big Ron Williams fan. I remembered seeing it at some point, like in bits and pieces, in terms of never sat down and watched it. Right. I was like, yeah, I've seen the Birdcage. It's funny. Like, you know, seen enough of it. And then I watched it for this. And it was, I'm trying to figure out a way to it was hard to watch.
Really?
Yeah. I found it very grim, like mean-spirited, and I just couldn't get over the setup being mean-spirited and just nasty. I found the entire movie very nasty. The son, I just could not get over what an evil kid this was, of like, my dad is gay. He's accepted it. The son, I think, has in the film, but he's asking his dad to hide who he is. And then also, I mean, they weren't married because gay marriage wasn't legal back then, but basically kick his husband, I'll call him husband, out of the house and shame him and say, you know what, I'm embarrassed of the person that you're in love with. I don't ever want to see this guy. Get him out of here. And you know what, Dad, I want you to lie and erase everything of who you are, which, you know, they dove into his background a little bit. He struggled with coming out a little bit, and he seemed incredibly insecure and sad. Rob Williams' performance, it just left a wounded soul is what I got out of him for this entire film. And like the son is just like kicking him when he's down. And it just, I couldn't get over that. And the film letting the son win in the end, like he gets the girl, he gets married. It even ends with a freeze frame of like him smiling. It's like the villain just won. And I could not get over that. Yes, there were also a lot of really like problematic and dated moments with like Hank Azaria, who, you know, he's kind of like the Rob Schneider, where like every character he's done in his entire career, like should have got him canceled at any time. You know, in this film, he plays a incredibly like effeminate Hispanic, even though he is not gay, nor is he Hispanic at all. And so, yeah, there were a lot of problematic elements that I could sort of like look beyond, just because it did come out, you know, in the mid 90s. But yeah, I had a really, really hard time with this movie. It actually like affected me for days afterwards. It shook me to the Robin Williams core. I literally was like, is this guy even funny? Like it, and who's one of my favorite comedic actors? And it really did shook me. I mean, it was an experience. I will say that, that, you know, I researched, what is this? Where did this movie come from? Okay, it's a play that was written in France in the early 70s. I'm like, okay, well, maybe that could have landed then in that context. But yeah, I had a really hard time with this movie. Actually, the only laughs I found, I think Gene Hackman's character was actually very funny. He was the only one that I felt had a heart, actually. It's like his, you know, he's not supposed to be. He's like the bigoted, you know, Republican, like you mentioned, who's against gay marriage. But I got from him, and maybe it's just the performance of the fact that I like Gene Hackman. It's like he was only doing that for votes. Like he had a kind heart. He didn't, you know, which, you know, I'm not saying I'm defending people that support bad policy, even though they don't believe in it themselves. But there was something about his character that I sort of like. In the beginning of the film, they were cutting between the Miami stuff with Nathan Lane and Ron Williams, and then the Gene Hackman bits where he's dealing with his running mate, he's going to run for president. His running mate was just caught in some sex scandal, like him dealing with that. And I'm like, I just want to see that movie. Like that movie's funny and like kind of warm-hearted. And this other movie is just very depressing and dark and grim and just nasty, and all the people just, I just really had a hard time with this. And I was trying to think too, like what the lesson that we were supposed to get out of this. Like, did anyone learn anything in the message of the movie? Like I was struggling with that because it had such a visceral like impact from having watched this. It was like getting hit by a train. It was crazy. But I'm glad I saw it, because again, like I would have told you, yeah, I've seen this before and it was funny, you know, because I watched bits and pieces of it in the 90s. But yeah, this was a tough one. So maybe you can help me. Like, what do you think the message, like, did anyone learn anything you think in the movie? And like, what was the message of the movie that you take away from it? Because I was just trying to find like what that was supposed to be, and maybe help me understand, like, you know, what the filmmakers were trying to say, I guess, with this.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I would say I'm not surprised by that reaction, because there is definitely a way to look at this movie where that part sort of just hits you. And that's why I said, even in my description, that the son is problem.
Bad guy, really bad guy.
Really awful guy. And I wish they had imbued a little bit more humanity. And it's also a really bad performance because, I get it. He's a 20-year-old. Kids
Right.
are selfish. They don't really know better and what have
Right.
you. But I think it's played really poorly where everything he's doing comes off as really mean-spirited and sort
Right.
of serious, as
Mhm.
opposed to a kid who doesn't know what they're doing and they still
Right.
have a good heart, so that part is a big failure of the movie. But
Hmm.
I don't know, maybe I've just watched this movie so many times that
Yeah.
I've just ignored him. I just don't pay attention to him.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
concerned with the rest of it all, because if you remove him, the rest of it is pretty funny to me, the way it's
Yeah.
done. Problematic in many ways, for sure.
Yeah.
But then I'm also reminded of the time where this movie was made, right? Like this is still the 90s.
I
And
know.
the
Yeah.
fact that this is like a mainstream movie directed by an Oscar-winning director
Yeah.
with this cast,
Yeah.
it is an achievement for its time, for sure. Of course, if you look at it now, this is like, oh my gosh, this is like full of problems. So I give it a
Yeah.
little bit of that too.
Yeah.
But going back to your question of the message, I think to me, the message is that these people who are supposedly very different
Hmm.
on the surface of it, you would never even see them in the same room. Here they are, they've gone through this entire night of dealing with each other and frankly exposing things of each other that were actually not true. Like you said, like Gene
Hmm.
Hackman is probably not bigoted. Uh,
Yeah.
and maybe there's some things that even Nathan Lane's character is trying to sort of emote that he is total, he does believe in sort of the quote unquote sort of maternal, simpler
Hmm.
life of man and woman building a home, what have you. There are elements. So to me, the message is that people might be very different on the surface, but they're still more alike than different. So that's
Mm.
one.
Okay.
And then number two is sort of the grand, sort of the finale of, the guys, the Republicans who are so supposedly polar opposite at the end of the movie walk out and drag. And and the way that they all work together to make that happen, to me, is sort of the cherry on the cake. That
Mm.
yeah, if you do you talk to each other and see each other and see past your differences and see the commonalities, you can join hands and make something work. Now what they're trying to make work is the marriage of these two idiots. So that's probably not the best outcome. So but
Right.
if you don't, I don't focus on that outcome. Whenever I watch this movie, I actually never get to the wedding. I
Mm.
just shut it
Yeah.
when they walk out of the drag club. Because to me, that is the end of the movie, that these people who are so different join hands and created this moment together. And in a way, comedy and humor is a part of them getting to that place. Because being in drag is sort of funny to begin with.
Mhm.
So that's the message to me.
Okay.
The final outcome is not the marriage. Nobody
Yeah.
cares. I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I just had a really hard time with this. But I slogged through it. And then had to do a bunch of little Robin Williams, chasers to remind myself that this guy can be funny and is a good comedic actor. I just stuffed myself with a bunch of Robin Williams movies to be like, oh yeah, no, this guy is, he's funny and warm and sweet. But yeah, again, like I'm glad I actually sat down and watched this movie. Even though, now I have a campaign to get it banned off of HBO Max. But no, I'm just kidding. But no, it's yeah, I'm definitely glad that I saw this. And yeah, just interesting to kind of go back to a movie that was, again, like you said, in the mid 90s was a huge commercial, critical, like across the board, like a very known and famous film. So it was very well received back then. I just had a hard time with it now, but yeah, glad I saw it. Definitely glad I saw it.
Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.